The cottage smelled of sea salt and new beginnings, that faint, deceptive freshness that clings to every promise after ruin. Emily stood at the window, watching the waves crawl toward the shore like something half alive, half hungry. Ryan was outside unloading the last of their bags, his movements precise, deliberate, as if each one carried the weight of redemption. They had come here to start over. That was the pact. The therapist had suggested isolation, a place where silence could heal. Emily had agreed, though silence was the one thing she feared most. In silence, her mind replayed the laughter that had stopped belonging to her, the texts she shouldn't have read, the woman she couldn't forget. Ryan entered, shaking sand from his shoes. "It's perfect, isn't it?" His voice was careful, wrapped in politeness instead of warmth. "It's quiet," Emily answered. Her tone was neutral, her hands still trembling from the drive. For a while, they unpacked in silence. The rhythmic crash of waves filled the spaces their marriage no longer could. Emily's eyes wandered to the framed photo on the mantel, their wedding day, frozen smiles under sunlight. Back then, his touch had steadied her. Now, it only reminded her how easily warmth can vanish. Later, over dinner, she asked, "Do you really think this can work?" Ryan didn't look up. "We came here to try. Try." A word that could mean everything or nothing. When night fell, the sea turned black, swallowing the horizon. Emily lay awake listening to it breathe. She remembered the first night she'd learned about the affair, how she had walked to the same kind of beach and imagined disappearing into the dark. Now, lying beside him again, she felt that same tide inside her chest, a pull between love and survival. Outside, Ryan's shadow moved past the curtains. He stood by the window, staring at the ocean too long, too still. "Ryan," she whispered. He turned, smiled faintly. Just watching the waves, but Emily knew that look. It wasn't peace. It was rehearsal, the practiced calm of a man trying to bury something the tide might one day return. The morning came soft and gray, the air soaked in the scent of seaweed and damp earth. Emily woke to the sound of gulls and the whisper of pages turning. Ryan downstairs reading something by the window. When she joined him, he closed the notebook too quickly. "Couldn't sleep," he said, forcing a smile. "Just writing thoughts down." "Since when do you journal?" she asked. "Since now," he said, and kissed her cheek, too swiftly, too gently. Later, while unpacking his duffel, Emily found another notebook tucked inside a side pocket. Its cover was worn, edges softened by years of handling. She hesitated, telling herself she only wanted to see if it was empty. But it wasn't. Inside were fragmented lines, unfinished sentences, obsessive scribbles. "The water remembers." She was screaming before the tide took her. "The girl I couldn't save." The handwriting grew darker, heavier, as if the ink itself were drowning. Emily's chest tightened. She told herself it must be old, maybe something from his college days or one of his creative exercises. But Ryan was no writer. He was an accountant, a man of numbers, not ghosts. She slid the journal back before he noticed, her hands trembling. At noon, they drove into town for their first therapy session. The office was small, overlooking the cliffside, pale curtains fluttering like sea foam. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Carver, smiled as if she could already hear their unspoken war. "So," she began, "tell me what brought you both here." Ryan's answer came too fast. "We needed distance." Emily looked at him, waiting for the rest, but none came. "Distance from what?" the therapist asked. He paused, fingers tightening around his knee. "From everything." When it was Emily's turn, her voice wavered. "We lost trust. I lost myself." Dr. Carver nodded, writing something down. "And are you rebuilding?" Ryan smiled again, that careful, polished smile. "We're trying." But in the reflection of the window, Emily caught him glancing at the ocean beyond, his eyes unfocused, haunted. She wondered if he was thinking of her, whoever she was. That night, while Ryan showered, Emily opened the window to the sea breeze. Somewhere below, the tide rolled in and out, dragging secrets across the sand. She whispered to the dark, "Who did you try to save, Ryan?" The waves didn't answer, but something inside her already knew the next storm was coming. Forgiveness, Emily had learned, was not a moment. It was a ritual. You performed it daily, like tending to a wound that refused to close. She remembered the day the wound first opened. It had been summer, bright, blistering, merciless. Ryan's phone had buzzed across the kitchen counter. Mia. Lunch today. The name had meant nothing at first, just another co-worker in his office of polished smiles and after-hours deadlines. But when Emily had picked up the call and heard the silence on the other end, she'd understood instantly. Silence, she discovered, was guilt's native tongue. For months, she had stayed. She'd watched him come home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She'd cooked dinner anyway, washed his shirts, smiled when neighbors waved. She'd told herself marriage was a kind of endurance, that good wives waited until the storm passed. But some storms don't end. They simply move inside you. Now, years later, as the wind howled outside the coastal cottage, Emily tried to believe the sea could cleanse them both. They'd come here for peace, hadn't they? To rebuild? Yet the memory of that phone buzz lingered louder than the waves. She stood at the window, watching lightning flicker across the water like veins of light under the skin of the world. Ryan had gone to bed early, or so she thought. A crash of thunder split the night. Emily flinched, turning toward the door. The sound of footsteps creaked through the house, slow, deliberate. She moved to the hallway, heart pounding. Through the crack in the curtain, she saw him, Ryan, in his coat, walking toward the shore. No flashlight, no shoes, just his shadow melting into the storm. "Ryan," she called, her voice barely audible over the wind. No answer. She watched as he reached the edge of the surf, the waves thrashing around his legs. He stood there motionless, staring into the black horizon, like he was waiting for something to rise from it. Emily's breath caught. She thought of the words in his journal. "The girl I couldn't save." Then lightning struck again, and he was gone from sight. Only the sea remained, roaring, as if swallowing a secret it had been keeping far too long. The storm passed by dawn, leaving behind a silence so sharp it felt like punishment. Emily hadn't slept. The sheets were still damp where Ryan should have been, though she found him asleep on the couch at sunrise, his clothes half wet, his hair clinging to his forehead. "You went outside," she whispered. He stirred, blinking as if surfacing from another world. "I couldn't sleep, the air was heavy." "You were by the water," she pressed. "I just needed space, Em, that's all." His tone was gentle, rehearsed, like every word was part of some fragile performance he couldn't afford to break. She didn't believe him, not entirely, but the morning light made doubt feel small, almost cruel, so she said nothing. By noon, the town's quiet routine cracked open. A siren wailed somewhere near the shore. Emily stepped onto the porch, shielding her eyes against the glare. People were gathering along the dunes. Fishermen, neighbors, strangers. The ocean had returned something it no longer wanted. A body, wrapped in seaweed and salt, pale against the sand. Emily's breath hitched when she saw the hair, dark auburn, tangled like kelp. For a second, her mind betrayed her. Mia, Ryan, appeared behind her, face ashen. "Let's not—" But she was already walking toward the beach, the sound of gulls tearing through the air. The police had cordoned off the area, voices muffled under the crash of waves. One officer lifted a plastic tarp just enough for identification. Emily turned away, bile rising in her throat. Ryan didn't look. He couldn't. Later, the news confirmed it. A woman, mid-30s, no ID, no wallet. But the next detail froze. Emily's blood. A business card found in the victim's pocket, belonging to Ryan Hale. The words echoed through the living room as the reporter's voice played on the TV. "Ryan," she said slowly, "why was your card with her?" He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wide, defensive. "It could be anyone from work. People have my cards all the time." Emily wanted to believe him, but his voice trembled too long on the word anyone. That evening, 2 officers came to question them, polite, professional, patient, the kind of patience reserved for liars. Ryan answered everything perfectly, almost too perfectly. When they left, Emily sat in the dim light, staring at the sea. The waves were calmer now, but she knew better. The ocean never kept peace. It only waited to bring the rest of the truth ashore. The storm returned that night, smaller but crueler. A tantrum of wind and water against the windows. Power lines trembled, and then the house went dark. Emily lit 3 candles on the kitchen table. Their flickering light carved Ryan's face into sharp, uneven shadows. He looked older, thinner, like guilt had been feeding on him quietly. She broke the silence first. They said the woman might have been dead for weeks before the tide brought her back. Ryan didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the candle flame, the way one might stare into confession. "Ryan," she whispered, "tell me it's not her." His lips parted, then closed again. "Beat 2, then he said it. "I saw Mia once, months ago." The words landed like glass breaking. Emily froze. "You told me it ended." "It did. She came to see me. Said she wanted to talk, to make peace." His voice was low, almost pleading. "We met by the cliffs. She was upset. I told her to leave, and she did. That's all." The storm rattled the windows again, as if mocking him. Emily's heart thudded in her throat. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to hurt you again," he said. "I thought if I buried it, it would die there." She laughed, a sound she didn't recognize. "You think burying things works?" "The sea disagrees." He looked at her then, eyes glinting in the candlelight. Desperate, defensive, something in between. "You think I killed her?" "I don't know what to think anymore." For a long time, neither spoke. The candles hissed as wax pooled at their bases. The house creaked under the wind's weight. Ryan leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not innocent either, Emily. You liked her gone. You liked knowing she couldn't take me from you again." Her breath caught. "You don't get to rewrite the story to make yourself the victim." He smiled, slow, bitter, knowing. "I'm not the only one hiding things." The words lingered long after the storm quieted. When Emily blew out the last candle, the darkness didn't lift. It simply settled deeper, between them, within them, waiting for morning to bring someone else to their door. The morning after the storm. The world seemed scrubbed raw, the air too clear, the silence too deliberate. Emily sat at the table, her coffee untouched, watching Ryan pace. Every movement of his felt calculated now, like a man rehearsing innocence. When the knock came, Ryan froze. Emily's heart stuttered. A tall man stood in the doorway, mid-40s raincoat, kind eyes sharpened by habit. "Detective Hall," he said, flashing a badge. "I'm following up on the incident by the beach." Ryan gestured politely. "Of course." "Come in." The detective's gaze drifted across the room, to the half-burned candles, the unwashed dishes, the damp footprints by the window. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't the friendly kind. "Strange storm last night," he said. "Terrible thing what the sea dragged in." Emily's pulse quickened. "Have they identified her?" "Not officially," he replied, eyes flicking toward Ryan. "Though we have possibilities." Ryan folded his arms. "We already told the officers everything." Hall nodded. "Just tying up threads. You said you were asleep when the storm hit." Ryan hesitated, a single beat too long. "Yes," the detective turned to Emily. "And you, Mrs. Hale?" She looked at Ryan before answering. "I didn't sleep." Hall watched her, intrigued. "You seem certain?" "I saw him by the window," she admitted, instantly regretting it. "He said he needed air." Ryan shot her a look, not anger, but something colder. A warning. Hall leaned back in his chair. "The sea's tricky that way. Brings up old things. Sometimes people we thought were gone for good." His words hung heavy between them. When he finally left, the air in the room changed. Emily exhaled shakily. Ryan didn't move. "You shouldn't have said that," he murmured. "I told the truth, your version of it," he said, voice low. "Be careful what you start, Emily. You don't know how it ends." That night, Emily couldn't sleep again. Every sound from the shore felt like footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. And when she finally drifted into uneasy dreams, she saw the same face over and over, Mia's, floating beneath the waves. Lips parted as if whispering something only Emily was meant to hear. The morning fog rolled in thick and colorless, swallowing the coastline in silence. Emily sat at the kitchen table, still in her robe. tracing circles on her coffee cup. Ryan had gone into town for supplies, though she suspected it was just an excuse to escape her. When the mail slipped through the door, she almost ignored it. Only one envelope, unmarked, thin, no return address. Her name scrawled across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. She tore it open. A single sheet of paper. No signature, just words. You think he's the monster, but you buried her. The cup fell from her hand, shattering on the floor. Emily stood frozen, staring at the note. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The words pulsed on the page, not accusation, but memory. A sound rose in her ears, waves crashing, sharp and rhythmic. Just like that night. She hadn't thought about it in years. The night Mia came to the house. It was raining then, too. The same kind of relentless drizzle that blurred everything between right and wrong. Mia had stood on the porch, eyes red, trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she'd said. "I never wanted to—" "Stop," Emily had interrupted, voice shaking. "You already did." Mia had tried to step inside, but Emily blocked her. Their argument grew louder, raw, words slashing like wind. Then came the slip, a desperate step backward on the wet wooden stair. The sound of a body hitting the ground, the dull crack that followed. Emily remembered running down, kneeling beside her. The rain pouring harder, washing the blood into the soil. She'd whispered her name, but the sea was louder. She had told herself it was an accident. Terrible, tragic accident. Now, years later, the note in her hand whispered otherwise. When Ryan returned, she hid it in the drawer beneath the sink. He asked what was wrong. She smiled and said, "Nothing." That night, as she lay awake, she heard the ocean again, whispering through the cracks in the window, repeating the same word until she could no longer deny it. Buried, and for the first time. She wasn't sure if the sea or her conscience was calling her name. The note haunted her long after the ink dried. Each night, Emily replayed the words until they bled into her dreams, the edges of memory softening and shifting until she could no longer tell guilt from truth. She walked to the cliffs that morning, the same path she had avoided for years. The air smelled of wet stone and salt, heavy with déjà vu. The tide was rising, hissing against the rocks below, as if warning her not to remember. But memory has its own tide, relentless, unforgiving. She closed her eyes. It had been late, past midnight. The night Mia came, Emily had heard the knock and almost ignored it. But something in the rhythm, desperate, uneven, drew her to the door. Mia stood there, drenched, mascara streaking like black rain. "He told me it's over," she'd said, voice shaking. "Please, Emily, I didn't mean for this to happen." Emily had laughed, not out of cruelty, but exhaustion. "You didn't mean to destroy a marriage?" "That's comforting." Mia's lip trembled. "You don't understand. He said you were gone, that you left." The lie hit Emily harder than any confession. "You believe that?" Mia took a step forward, her hand outstretched. "I wanted to fix it. I wanted to tell you." But Emily's anger, years of it, cracked open. "You wanted to cleanse your conscience. You got what you wanted, Mia. Now get out." Mia shook her head, tears spilling. "He'll never love you again." That was when Emily pushed past her. Not hard, just enough to make space between them. But the rain had made the ground slick. One step backward, one sharp scream, and then nothing but the sound of breaking waves below. Emily remembered running to the edge, the flashlight trembling in her hand, the sea boiling beneath. She'd called Mia's name, but the wind carried it away. She had told herself it was fate, not fault, that the sea took what it wanted. Now, standing in the same spot, her hands trembling, Emily felt the lie unravel. The body on the beach wasn't a haunting, it was a reckoning. When she returned home, Ryan was waiting at the table, pale and silent. "You went out again," he said. "Yes." His eyes flicked up, dark and hollow. "Then you already know what the sea brought back." She said nothing, because the truth was already rising between them, like the tide, impossible to stop. The storm came without warning that night, a roaring, restless thing that clawed at the windows as if demanding entry. The air inside the cottage felt just as violent, thick with things unsaid. Emily found Ryan in the kitchen, the letter in his hand, the same letter she'd hidden beneath the sink. The paper trembled between his fingers, warped by the damp air. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. It was under the cleaning rags, he said flatly. You think I wouldn't find it? Her throat went dry. It's not what you think. Ryan laughed, sharp, bitter, almost unhinged. You think I'm the monster? You've been sitting here judging me while this, he waved the note in her face, was written to you. Lightning flashed, bleaching the room in white for a heartbeat. Emily saw the fury in his eyes, but beneath it fear. Tell me, he demanded, stepping closer. What did you do? She met his gaze, something inside her breaking loose. You think I killed her? You pushed her there, Ryan. You made her desperate. His jaw clenched. I didn't push anyone. I tried to end it before it went too far. He stopped, breath trembling. You let her die. Emily shook her head violently. She slipped. I tried to help her. I panicked. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you would have turned it into another lie. She cried. Everything with you is performance. The therapy, the kindness, the guilt. You didn't want forgiveness. You wanted to bury the evidence. Thunder cracked, rattling the glass. Ryan slammed his fist on the counter. You wanted revenge. The words hit like a slap. They stared at each other, soaked in candlelight and accusation. Two ghosts bound by the same secret. Outside, the wind howled, echoing the chaos between them. I loved you, Emily whispered finally. Even after everything. Ryan's expression softened, but only for a moment. Then you should have stayed away from the cliffs. Another flash of lightning, and the power went out. For a second, there was only darkness and the sound of the sea rising higher, pounding against the shore like something waiting to claim them both. By dawn, the storm had spent itself, leaving the world pale and hollow. The ocean lay still, too still, as if exhausted by what it had witnessed. Emily stood by the window, her reflection ghost-like in the gray light. Ryan's coat was gone. So were his boots. She searched every room, calling his name, but the house answered only with echoes. On the table lay the soaked letter, folded once beside his wedding ring. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. A few words scrawled hastily across the back of the note. I can't carry it anymore. Emily's chest tightened. She ran outside, barefoot, her breath turning white in the cold air. The sand was wet and dark, the tide pulling back slow and heavy. Near the waterline, she saw footprints, his leading straight toward the waves. Ryan! She screamed, her voice ripped away by the wind. Nothing. Only the endless drag of water retreating. Turning. By the time the police arrived, she was standing at the edge of the surf, her nightgown clinging to her skin. Eyes fixed on the horizon, he went in, she said numbly. He confessed. He couldn't live with it. Detective Hall's gaze lingered on her too long. Confessed to what, Mrs. Hale? To everything, she whispered. To Mia. To what he did. Hall nodded slowly, then motioned to an officer scanning the beach. We'll start a search. As they moved closer to the shore, Hall knelt, studying the sand. Two parallel trails of footprints curved back from the water's edge. He frowned. Mrs. Hale, he called. You said he went in? Yes, she said softly. The sea took him. He looked again at the prints, clear, unmistakable. One set heading out, one set returning. But it seems, Hall murmured, the sea gave something back. Emily's eyes followed his gaze. For a moment she said nothing. Then she turned toward the water. Her expression unreadable. Grief, disbelief. Perhaps something darker. The waves rolled in again, gentler now, as if silencing the truth beneath their surface. Somewhere beyond the fog, a gull screamed, sharp, final, almost human, and when Emily finally looked down at her own feet, the sand beneath her was smooth, no footprints at all. The investigation ended the way most tragedies do, neatly, officially and utterly wrong. 3 days had passed since Ryan vanished. The local paper called it an accidental drowning. The ocean, it seemed, had claimed another restless soul. Detective Hall stopped by once more, his tone softer now, his questions perfunctory. You'll be heading back home soon? He asked. Emily nodded. Yes, there's nothing left here. Hall gave a polite half-smile, but his eyes lingered on her face, searching perhaps for something unspoken. Strange thing about the sea, he said, glancing toward the window. It always returns what it doesn't want. When he left, Emily locked the door and let the silence stretch. The house felt cavernous, as if emptied of air. Every room still carried Ryan's absence. The smell of his cologne, the dent on his side of the bed, the faint echo of his voice in the hallway. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, staring at the gray water. It looked calm again, deceptively so, like a predator pretending to sleep. Her voice, soft, almost detached, filled the quiet. They said it was an accident, that the sea took him, but I don't think the sea ever takes anything for free. She set the glass down, her reflection merging with the water beyond the glass. A ghost staring back. Maybe he's out there, she continued. Maybe he finally became what he always feared, a shadow that never comes home. Or maybe he's here, somewhere I can't see him, waiting for me to drown in the truth. A gust of wind rattled the window pane. The candle beside her flickered. That was when she noticed it, something small glinting on the sill. Ryan's wedding ring. It hadn't been there that morning. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. The metal was cold, damp, as if freshly pulled from the tide. Her breath caught. A whisper escaped her lips, barely audible. "Ryan?" No answer. Only the rhythmic hush of the waves, rising, falling, calling. Emily closed her eyes, clutching the ring tightly. "Maybe the sea doesn't keep the dead," she whispered. "Maybe it just trades them for the living." Outside, the tide began to rise again. 6 months later, the sea had changed color. Or maybe it was just Emily's eyes that saw it differently now. Not blue, not gray, but something in between. The color of memory. The cottage had long been sold. She lived inland now, in a quiet town where the wind didn't carry the sound of waves. But the ocean still lived inside her, murmuring in dreams, pulling her back each night to the cliffs, to the scream, to the silence that followed. Her book was finished. The Shoreline Pact, a memoir of forgiveness and truth. The publishers called it raw and courageous. The readers called it redemptive. None of them knew that the redemption was a lie. She had written about betrayal, loss, recovery, everything that could be written without breaking the fragile line between confession and survival. The world saw her as a woman reborn from tragedy. She let them. During the interviews, she spoke gently with measured pauses. "We all keep things buried," she told one journalist. "Sometimes the tide brings them back to remind us what we've lost." They applauded her honesty. No one asked what she'd left out. One rainy afternoon, the first box of printed copies arrived. She opened it slowly, inhaling the scent of paper and ink, her story bound and complete. She ran her fingers over her name, Emily Hale. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to read the final chapter. She hadn't touched it since sending the manuscript off. As her eyes traced the last paragraph, she noticed something that shouldn't have been there. A small note, folded between the final pages. Her pulse quickened. The handwriting was unmistakable. "You told them everything, except the part where you smiled." The ink bled slightly, as if written with damp hands. Emily dropped the book, her breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The window beside her shuddered open with the wind. She turned, and there on the sill was the same ring, Ryan's ring, the one she had buried in a drawer. A drop of seawater fell from it, darkening the wood. Outside, the wind carried a distant sound. Waves breaking. Relentless, familiar. Emily stood frozen. The note still in her hand. Maybe the ocean didn't keep secrets. Maybe it just waited until you were ready to drown in them again. And somewhere beyond the rain, she thought she heard him laugh, soft, close, endless.